they made a deal with a person who later became Lieutenant Governor of Montana. He said he'd take over their records, he'd protect them and take care of them, for them, make them safe. Guess what? All the records went. But you know what? The very next session of the legislature, we had a bill before us to change the Universal Commercial Code. The bill was that thick. We had a week to look at it. And it passed without a whimper. I think 3 of us voted against us. I think only 3 of us. We need to stand up for our rights.
Absolutely.
We can't do it as individuals. Because when I get to Helena and do something like I'm going to do when the legislature convenes again to repeal that bill that had to do with nursery people, where Ginny Emerson has to pay $1,000 or whatever that license fee is if she sells some extra plants from her greenhouse. Unless someone comes there to show up and say, hey, this is affecting us adversely, I'm the Lone Ranger, folks. And this has happened in the past. It'll probably happen again. But the Human Rights Network has ridiculed me continually because of the Freeman incident. I circulated a petition. I had, as I recall, every member of the Montana House of Representatives sign that petition, which would have granted amnesty to those people, the Freeman, who were over there on that compound afraid to come out. The idea was not that I supported what they were doing. The reason I drafted that petition was to give them an opportunity to come to Helena and testify before the governor and the attorney general or whoever else would take the time to listen to see what the problem was. And believe me, there was a problem. And I'll tell you what I think the problem was. I think that some of those Freemen, not all, but some of them, were doing exactly what the Federal Reserve is doing, creating money out of nothing. Creating money out of nothing. And I'll tell you another thing. Right now, one of the biggest items where our national debt is concerned is, guess what? Interest that we owe the Federal Reserve for coining money out of nothing.
That's right.
And letting us use it. Now that is not right. When I ran for U.S. Senate in 1980, that was the issue that lost me the nomination, the Republican nomination. Because there are a lot of bankers who think the Federal Reserve is just fine. They don't go into it. But there's a fellow on Whidbey Island who has pioneered for years. And he had a real sympathizer in Ron Paul, that the Federal Reserve is just an offshoot and the result of Congress abrogating its authority to control the currency in the United States of America. The Federal Reserve is not federal. It's an independent banking organization. And its aims and its role that's being played in the world, among the world powers and among the world bankers is what we're facing right now, the outcome. So a lot of people have been talking for a long time to try to bring this country to its senses, but it hasn't been happening. So all I could say is that we have to stand together. We have to know what we see. We have to document what we see. And as a group and as a community, we'll be able to get something done. But one person alone can't.
Thank you very much. That's what we need to do is clear it up.
Since the subject came up, I'm going to
Can
do a
I
little...
ask one thing though?
Just since the subject came up, I'm going to do a little monologue here. You folks have probably never heard the real story behind the Freeman incident. So I'd like to tell you from my perspective. I've been in the radio business for a long time, on the internet and so on. I've been a patriot for a long time. kind of a lazy patriot. I pick the battles that I think I can get something done with. And I heard about these freemen over in Roundup, Montana. And I heard that they had evidence that the Montana state government had been hijacked, and that there was a conspiracy to control the elections and so forth, and that they had evidence on a CD-ROM about the money issues, and that the money was being devalued. And they were making lots of noise, and I got caught in between that philosophy and the philosophy of John Trockman and his militia group over in Oxon. He's talking about the lawful militia. And so I just took it upon myself to throw some stuff in my pickup and go over and interview and meet Leroy Schweitzer, which is the gentleman that Aubin was mentioning. And he showed me a lot of his evidence, and I said, okay, this has to come to an head some way. This has to be brought out into the public some way. People have to know the truth about this if you're going to get anything done. And Aubin, you were precisely correct. The freemen were creating a credit currency based on exactly what the Federal Reserve has done, and they were issuing certified money orders based on that credit currency. And that is on the record of the court in Billings, Montana during John Trockman's trial, and I put it there. This was after this was all done. Because they asked me, the prosecutor asked me, well, why did you go over there, and what were the issues? And I told him I went to sell these guys some radios. I sold a certified, a notarized purchase order for $600,000 worth of this stuff, radio communications, to that group of freemen. And they drew up that certified purchase order, notarized, and they drew up their certified money order to pay for that. And I brought it back, and I deposited it in Glacier Bank right here in Eureka. And they said, well, we've got to send this for collection. I said, fine. We opened a regular passbook savings account and deposited that amount of money. They sent it for collection. Now let me ask you a question. If you write a rubber check, what happens to that check? Let's say you go to a local merchant, Montana Market up here, and you write him a rubber check. And the check bounces and it comes back. Who gets that check? The merchant gets that check back so that he can go back to the person that wrote that check and say, well, this bounced. Now what can you do to make it good? Are you going to pay me in cash, or are you going to give me something of other value to make this check good on the purchase? Otherwise I have to take the equipment back. Well, I hadn't delivered any equipment. It was on order and I could have fulfilled the order. But the FBI stole the money order. They interfered in the lawful banking process and took that instrument, and I never saw it again. I was powerless to do anything about it. If I had that instrument back, I could have gone to Leroy Schweitzer and I could have presented that instrument and said, now, Mr. Schweitzer, we've got a binding contract here. And this instrument you gave me is no good. What are you going to do to make it good? And at that point, Leroy Schweitzer would have exercised the lawful liens that he had against the agents of government that did this to us. And he would have hit their insurance companies, their bonds, he would have taken their homes, he would have directed the sheriff to go confiscate enough personal property to make good on those. Now, here's another upshot of this whole thing. You remember a few years later when the government of Mexico defaulted on a loan for $40 billion. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah.
You know what instruments were used to pay off that debt? They sent a courier to Mexico with Leroy Schweitzer's instruments, and that's what they used to pay that debt back. Schweitzer was operating under the UCC, the same laws that the Federal Reserve operates under. And my whole purpose was to blow this all out into the open. And after the major media, right while we were in the jail for 13 days, the minute we got there, they had these stories all canned that we were going to kidnap a judge and hang him while filming it with videotape to intimidate whoever. What we went to the jail for was, I had loaned one of these radios to a friend of mine, and he loaned it to one of the freemen. I was over there selling radios, remember? And they wanted to find out how they work. So he took it for a demo, and those two freemen went to town, and they didn't have a license on their pickup.